What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 130, and I'm the host, Kyle Anzalone. On today's show, I'm interviewing Dave DeCamp, news editor at antiwar.com. Follow him at DeCamp Dave on Twitter. And we're talking about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, trying to figure out exactly what the Biden administration's plan is for leaving up to 1,000 troops in the country, and then potentially how much air support are we going to give to the Afghan government, and also look at what Biden's policy towards Russia is and why, despite having a somewhat positive summit in Geneva, are they engaging in very provocative actions now. So all that and more on today's show. Be sure to share it. You can find the show at the Libertarian Institute, libertarianinstitute.org/Kyle for a full archive of my work. Video version at YouTube and Odysee. Support the show by donating at Patreon or Subscribestar, and follow the show on Twitter at con_interest, or then on the Facebook or MeWe page. You can also support the show by supporting our sponsor and getting yourself some great CBD products at Paloma Verde. The URL is palomaverdecbd.com. They have a wide selection of CBD products, extracts, soft gels. Everything could be infused with different things like curcumin and melatonin, even products for your dog. But my personal favorite are the topicals. I use the sports cream or the Slav about every day. It doesn't take that much, so the one bottle or container that you get is going to go a long way, and you get a pretty instant relief of the pains and aches you're feeling, and it works for quite a long time. So really suggest Paloma Verde and their great lineup of CBD products. The URL again is palomaverdecbd.com. Promo code PEACE when you check out, PEACE. It'll save you 25% off when you spend $75 or more. All right, everybody, now let's get into the show. How's it going, Dave? Welcome back to the show.
I'm good, Kyle. Thanks for having me back. Always good to be here.
Glad to have you on, and you do such a great job of breaking down the news on the show because you cover it with just such a frequency for us at antiwar.com. Everybody always check out news.antiwar.com every day. The front page of the website, Dave usually has like half the news sections there is things that he wrote up. There's also great stuff from Jason Ditz and Rick Rosaroff, and then you find the viewpoints underneath that. But anyways, Dave, let's start with some of the most important news, and that is the U.S. relationship with Russia. And there's been some interesting, I guess, what the Biden administration is saying versus what they're doing. Blinken is saying they want a stable relationship, but at the same time, they're engaging in all kinds of provocations with Russia, like flying a spy plane over our near Russian territorial waters at the same time that the HMS Defender is sailing through those waters, creating this situation we had with Russia last week that we covered on the show. So, Dave, I just, wondering what you think is going on here in the Biden administration and what exactly they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's tough to know exactly what their goal is when it comes to Russia. We would like to think that it's not a war or anything that crazy, but I think the Russians kind of put it well. They say that the U.S. wants to kind of contain Russia, which I think is true to an extent, and not contain Russia, but more contain Russian influence and Russian trade. But yeah, so Blinken says he wants a more predictable and stable relationship with Russia. He said this on Tuesday. And the issue, there is that it's the U.S., it's the Biden administration that's being more kind of unpredictable. And after the summit between Biden and Putin in Geneva that took place on June 16th, I got a little hopeful. It seemed like there was a chance to ease tensions, and they agreed to return ambassadors to each other's capitals, because that's always dangerous when tensions are so high, especially between the two major nuclear powers, that they don't even have an ambassador in each other's capitals. They were both missing from their posts for a few months before the summit, and they agreed to eventually hold arms control talks, which isn't we wish that they would just, start them already, but at least there was that statement. They released a joint statement on that. But then a few days later, the U.S. is already threatening sanctions. Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, said that they're preparing sanctions over Navalny, who's the opposition figure that's in jail now. And they accuse Russia of poisoning him, and Russia denies it. But Blinken said if Russia continues its aggression, that the U.S. will be forced to respond. Now, here is another issue, is that he cited the SolarWinds hack, which we've talked about. And, the U.S. was quick to blame Russia, but they never provided evidence. We don't really have any reason to believe that it was Russia unless the U.S. can show us evidence, because they accuse Russia, of just about everything. So he cited the SolarWinds hack, election interference in the 2020 election, which is just a joke because they accuse Putin of ordering a denigration campaign, they called it, against Biden. And it was an intelligence assessment released by the DNI. And all it said was that there was Russian news coverage of Biden's corruption in Ukraine, how he backed a coup, and then he gave his son a job there on the board of Burisma, the energy company. So that claim
that's such a strange indictment of Russia, that their press covered corruption stories of a world leader. Yeah. Now, I get it that is the opposition, in the global perspective of Russia, but at the same time, I mean, it's just such a ridiculous claim. Also, Dave, are we gonna have to get rid of the DNI Twitter account if they're tweeting out that there was the 2020 elections, there was questionable interference going on, or is it just this is the only kind of interference that's allowed? We could say that it's Iranian, Russian, Chinese, or something like that, but to talk about any other kind of election meddling or anything when it came to 2020 is a cancelable offense.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. But so these claims that Blinken has against Russia, I mean, they're kind of just nonsense. And then Navalny. So even if they did poison him, which I haven't looked into it enough to say, I'm always hesitant to believe U.S. claims against Russia. But I don't know. But even if they did, I mean, that's not Russian aggression against the U.S. That's, why. It's funny. You see these reporters that during the summit, these American reporters yelling at Putin about Navalny, and none of them are even mentioned Julian Assange, who is, it's different than Navalny, but Assange is a journalist who's being tortured in prison by the U.S. and the U.K. For being a journalist, and but nobody wants to talk about that. Isn't Russia sanctioning us for that? It's sanctioning the U.S. for that,
right? And I mean, even you could look at Erwin Schiff, who was at least threw his name in contention for a Libertarian Party presidential candidate at a time, and was put in jail for writing a book about how to not pay income tax. Not that I would ever suggest anybody try it or anything like that, but he essentially died, I believe, chained, even though he had cancer and was blind and 90 years old, they still had him handcuffed to his hospital bed when he died. And of course, when you look at the U.S. prison system and how, you could get treatment for cancer and stuff like that, it's pretty clear that it was at least medical neglect that resulted in his life ending when it did. And I mean, how is this different than Navalny, other than Navalny's a bigger figure because the U.S. has amplified his voice? And also, I believe Amnesty International, or I think it was them, removed their prisoner of conscience label for Navalny because of his very crude statements he made about the Muslim Russians. And he's a Russian ethno-nationalist. I think if he were, in the U.S., people would maybe compare him to a Richard Spencer-esque figure, and he wouldn't be allowed on Twitter. So it's very interesting that they make this giant cause of him.
Yeah, and they've already sanctioned Russia for him and expelled diplomats for Navalny and the SolarWinds hack. And just all these things. So that's kind of the issue, is that the U.S., if they choose to kind of blame, they could just blame Russia for something kind of anytime that they want as an excuse, as a pretext for sanctions or other aggressive actions. And then there's, of course, besides the sanctions, there is the provocations that you were talking about. I mean, that HMS Defender sailing, it was about 12 nautical miles from Crimea. I mean, that was just an insane provocation. And there was documents, strangely, they were found at a bus stop in the UK. And they were classified British documents, but it revealed that the British knew that Russia would have a strong reaction to them sailing a ship there, and of course they would. And then this gets into the other story I wrote yesterday about Putin. He accused the U.S. of being involved in the provocation, and he said that there was a spy plane deployed from Crete, the Greek island in the Mediterranean, that morning, and that it was monitoring the Defender to see, how Russia would respond. And that was confirmed by a U.S. official from U.S. European Command. So yeah, I mean, there's a very good chance that the U.S. It kind of told the U.K. to do it, or at least nudged them along when they definitely coordinated on it. And there was a BBC reporter aboard the ship. It was all just this big. It's funny because Putin calls it a provocation. We're calling it a provocation. I don't know what else you could call it, but in all the Western media reports on it, provocation is in quotes. It's like, but yeah, and the European command official tried to, kind of downplay it and say, yeah, we always have planes in the Black Sea. But yeah, no matter how frequently it is, it's a very sensitive area, and it's just an unnecessary risk.
That's one thing I was wondering if you had a take on. It seems that the UK is very interested in downplaying this event, when typically it seems that they do the opposite, Dave, where let's say we had the U.S. in the South China Sea, or the U.S. in the Black Sea, and a Russian plane buzzed it buzzed the USS Donald Cook once because it was getting close to Russian waters. Sometimes the Chinese will sail their ships in ways that the U.S. calls irresponsible or something like that, and so. I guess normally I would see the media reporting and the UK saying, oh my God, you won't believe this reckless thing that Russia did. But in this case, they're saying, nothing really happened. Russia was like bombing in the area. They were doing some other drills. We all know it wasn't a big deal. I guess, are you surprised by that? And do you have any idea of why they would react that way?
It's tough to say, but I would say a lot of times you mentioned the South China Sea and other confrontations with Russian ships that the U.S. has. They always say that they kind of escorted the U.S. ship out of the area, and the U.S. always denies that. They always say, "Oh no, we were leaving anyway." Kind of, they want to put on this display of just, we're the U.S., we could sail wherever we want. We don't care what these Russian and Chinese ships say. So I think it might be kind of a little bit of that. And they say it was like innocent passage, because they're just they want the U.S. and its allies want to be able to sail their warships anywhere in the world and not be contested. So I think it might be related to that.
That's interesting, because in the UK documents they found at the bus stop, one of the things that was mentioned, I guess, along the debate, was that if they sailed the ship outside those 12 nautical miles, it would appear as they were running away. Like, if so because their path was there, and so maybe that is the way they're trying to play it up. Although, David, who would care at all, or even know if that ship moved a little bit to sail outside of it? Would anybody in the UK, US, or anywhere even know? I don't even think the Russians would make that big of a deal out of, oh my God, the British are running away, or anything like that.
Yeah, no, nobody would, I don't think, really notice that. But maybe, I guess Russia would, and maybe they're trying to just send a message and trying to intimidate Russia. That's kind of what it seems like.
It seems so absurd that here we are in the Black Sea, which, You got the map here in your article, Dave, for people looking on the screen. This is as much as not American lake as you could possibly have, the Black Sea. The Turkey has the two gates to it, and then Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Russia, Georgia all have borders. There's no way that we should have American warships sailing around there, and yet we have the pretty massive sea breeze exercises going on there right now. And I guess looking at this, do you expect another incident to come in the next week? Although I did read Gilbert Doctorow has been writing on this, that Putin downplayed it and said it definitely wasn't going to be the start of World War III, and this was just an incident that happened, but Russia was trying to send a message, and so I guess, do we expect any other even incidents like this? And not that it would necessarily escalate into some big conflict, but do you see a risk with that?
Of another incident happening again, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's always a chance that that they might do it again. But I think not in the immediate future would be my guess. But again, it's tough to say. What's going through their minds with this. But another thing that's been going on that's really interesting is the UK. They have a new aircraft carrier, the HMS Queen Mary, I believe is the name of it. And it's out on its maiden voyage, and it's just sailing. It sailed through the Mediterranean, and it was launching airstrikes in Iraq against ISIS, and U.S. planes took off from this aircraft carrier and bombed Iraq. And these are airstrikes against ISIS that are pretty much always going on. A lot of the Biden's recent airstrikes in Iraq and Syria got a lot of attention, and that wasn't the first time he bombed Iraq. The U.S.-led coalition fighting ISIS has been bombing Iraq quite a bit lately, and a lot of raids against ISIS. So this war is just kind of in the background. But it was really amazing because there's a quote from the commander of the ship that said, "Oh yeah, bombing Iraq from our aircraft carrier. It's like," he was so like excited about it. He said, "Yeah, it's a good feather in our cap." Like, yep. They're kind of using this big display, like just the way that they use these countries as like target practice for their new ships. It's really just like kind of makes me sick. But now this aircraft carrier deployed with a big like strike group, a bunch of ships. It's the largest British Navy flotilla that's been deployed since the 1980s. So it's kind of a big deal, and they're heading to Asia now. And now this is the question. It's not clear if they're going to go through the South China Sea. There's been some reports saying that they might avoid it, but I have a feeling that they're going to go through it. And this is going to be another really dangerous kind of provocation. And it's also a big part of what Biden's plan is against Russia and China, is like kind of rallying allies, getting them to do all of this stupid stuff that the U.S. is always doing. France has been sailing through the South China Sea. So it's just something to keep an eye on. These symbolic things that are really, really dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, the bombings and the way they use that is really gross, especially when you consider, maybe not with an aircraft carrier, but with, especially aircraft, going on successful missions is a way to sell those aircraft to other countries. Switzerland was a country that was on the fence about buying the F-35 or not. They end up doing it. And so I'm sure, them being at Lockheed Martin able to say that all these countries are carrying out successful missions with the F-35s. Not that F-35s were used in the strikes in Iraq and Syria on the Shia militias. I believe those were F-15s and 16s. But, just think of how this works with, there is an international arms trade. And so successful missions means it's easier to promote those weapons. And that I think that's a part of it. And maybe, for the ships, maybe it's not about, selling them to France, but getting the UK to want to buy a second one if they find all these uses and utilities for it. So I don't know. I think there's some really, really dark about that kind of using these ships and those kind of missions where they're just rotating them in to do what the U.S. can already do, I'm sure, from the bases that they have in Qatar and around the Middle East and all of our other assets there. Just to clarify, did you say, or do you know if that ship was involved in the strikes against the Shia militias, or just that they have been taking part in missions against the Islamic State in Iraq?
Against the Islamic State. I don't think they were involved in the strikes against the Shia militias,
Okay.
as far as I know. But again, I'm not too sure of the details on that, where those strikes were launched. I'm actually not sure, so I can't say for sure that they weren't launched off that ship. But
Right. Or I was even wondering, sometimes it's not even all the air, maybe they'll launch a refueler or a tanker or a spy plane or a drone that somehow assists in the mission from that area.
yeah,
It doesn't have to necessarily be the plane that went and carried out the bombing. All right. So the last thing, I want to ask you about, like on the broad topic of Russia. I'm glad you start to talk about the UK ship going to sail through the South China Sea, because within the month, Thaddeus Russell was tweeting about how the new Cold War is primarily against Russia, and several people, and I think yourself included, were trying to tell him, no, you really got to understand that China, if not the main target, is like a dual primary target with Russia of the war hawks at this point, and the U.S. war machine, with everything they're doing to build up in the South China Sea and all these, new missile systems and stuff. A lot of it is directed towards China. So I was just wondering about your take on that, and how much of the new Cold War is really directed towards China. And a lot is still, NATO exists, Russia is still a threat, but even NATO is saying China's a problem.
yeah. I think it's kind of, in the long run, more about China than Russia now at this point, but again, there's always NATO. As long as NATO exists, that's going to be a very dangerous, kind of Cold War that's always going on. But with China, I mean, you see it. The Pentagon has identified China as the top pacing threat, or pacing challenge, they also call it. I just see it in the long run. And it's interesting that you mentioned Thaddeus Russell, because something I saw him say, and I've seen others say, is that these neocon think tanks, like the Center for a New American Security, they're kind of like the neocon think tank. Go on their website right now and see what they're talking about. It's all about China. And the guy who was appointed to advise Lloyd Austin came from Center for a New American Security. He's a special advisor, Eli Ratner. I think I've talked about him before on here.
Yep.
But he's a CNAS guy. And Kurt Campbell, he's the head. He's on the National Security Council, the head of Indo-Pacific. He's also one of these guys. And this is kind of the way they're all kind of leaning now. So I think that that's interesting. And, look back at the neocons in the 1990s, rebuilding America's defenses, the infamous letter that said, we need a new Pearl Harbor before 9/11. Look at that and see what they say about China. Kind of the long-term thing is China. And it's very interesting. And, one thing I talk about a lot too was the Hainan Island incident in 2001 during the Bush administration. A U.S. spy plane collided with a Chinese plane, and the Chinese pilot died. The American pilot landed on Hainan Island, which is it's a big island just south of China. And Dick Cheney and George Bush, they squashed that quick. But now, because at that time to me, the way I look at it, it wasn't time to go after China. They had a lot of other plans, but now it's all about China. And if something like that happened, I mean, could start a small little accident could really trigger a wider conflict. So it's really dangerous, and there's more spy planes than ever, U.S. spy planes flying in that area, and more warships. So I view Russia as kind of more of a risk of an imminent conflict. China is a little more down the line. We need to kind of decouple from them economically a little more. But what scares me is that a lot of people are kind of ripe for this Cold War. Everybody thinks the Chinese government is like controlling our elites. And it's not like there's nothing there. Of course, the U.S. corporations have a big interest in China, but it seems like the tides are turning. There are still the corporations that want good relations with China, but I think the arms industry and then maybe some of the other ones that are have real competition now in China, because a lot of these Chinese companies are competing with the U.S. corporations. I think they're drowning out the people that have interests there. So yeah, I think it's kind of it's scary to me. It's really scary what the situation with China and how people are kind of eating up all the propaganda.
Yeah, so. I really noticed through the 2020 election that for whatever reason the standard of hawkishness was no longer about who was a bigger hawk on Russia, which I mean, I think Romney and McCain both tried that on Obama and he dismissed it, and Obama won that election. But there was the real effort was to out hawk each other on China, and as you point out, kind of disturbing that this wasn't an unpopular opinion. They could have been misreading the room and been advocating for all of this, but even among Trump's base, there's a lot of hatred and belief that China is doing terrible things and to their own people. And I've had Pat McFarland on the show a couple times to really get into and talk about what's going on there. But I want to talk about Afghanistan because I cannot for the life of me figure out how they're calling it. I read this headline from CNN on the last show where they say that the U.S. is days from completing the withdrawal, but 1,000 troops could remain. And so how can you have a withdrawal from Afghanistan and keep 1,000 troops in that country? And you have a write-up on here at antiwar.com today on the, withdrawal and what's happening with the troop number. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so there's a few reports, not just the CNN one, yesterday that said, the U.S. is days away from completing its withdrawal, but they're going to leave some troops. So and to me, kind of the word withdrawal has kind of lost its meaning a long time ago. There's a lot of instances where they say that they withdrew from a country, but they left some troops. But yeah, I put it in quotes here because this number, 1,000 troops, that's the highest that I've seen. Most reports say that they're going to leave 650 troops to guard the embassy in Kabul. And so the U.S. is trying to frame this as, okay, our combat mission is over. It's just embassy security. So the Taliban should be happy with that. But they also have this plan to secure Kabul airport because if they want to fly diplomats in and out, they want the airport to be secure. And that would involve leaving 500 Turkish troops that are currently guarding the airport there. And now this 1,000 number, what I think it could mean is that 650 are for the embassy, and then the few hundred are going to help Turkey guard the airport. Some reports have said that those additional troops at the airport would be out by September 11th, which is the deadline set by President Biden that the Taliban has kind of accepted. So these reports say a lot have said that the withdrawal, the formal withdrawal, they called it in this one, would be done by July 4th. So they are closing major bases. Bagram is expected to close, a huge airfield. But now, again, they want to frame this 650 troops as kind of an innocent, we're just going to protect our embassy, which, countries have embassies with a small amount of troops in other countries. But 650 is a lot. And the embassy, it's a big compound. It's not just a building and a couple acres. It's a 35-acre compound. It's hosted like thousands of contractors before. It has the capability to, maybe the U.S. might keep some planes there, some drones. They could kind of have a little covert operation running out of there, which they will. It's, there's always covert stuff happening in U.S. embassies and most countries' embassies. And this is on top of the U.S. giving the Afghan military billions of dollars in aid. For the 2022, the U.S. is going to give the Afghan military $3.3 billion. I mean, that's getting close to Israel's numbers. So if you're the Taliban and you see this, it's like they're clearly not just there to protect their diplomats. They're clearly there to maintain this kind of control and influence over the government. They'll probably provide intelligence support. They might, there's a lot that the U.S. could do from that embassy, and if they control the airport and the embassy, they might have some sort of corridor there, and that's another thing. If they control the embassy, they might have some jets there and drones there that they could bomb Afghanistan with, and so yeah, I mean it's just not going to it's not a real end to the war if this is the presence that they're trying to keep. Because while the chances are small of the Taliban and the Afghan government, you know, having successful peace talks, if the U.S. actually like pulled out, it's a small chance. But kind of by continuing this presence, you're kind of just guaranteeing that the violence will continue. Like now, there's really no hope for talks to resolve something. Especially if the U.S. does the occasional airstrike. They keep talking about this over-the-horizon capability that they want to keep. It's like the lingo that they use for it, and that means they want to be able to bomb Afghanistan from outside of the country, which they said that they've already been doing. They've launched airstrikes from either aircraft carriers in the Gulf region or from U.S. bases in the Gulf countries there. So, yeah, I mean, they are withdrawing in a way by closing all these major bases. They're not keeping like a sustainable presence. But then, the U.S. with 650 troops and control of an airport and a big compound like the embassy, there's a lot that the U.S. can do there. And, it's just going to fuel more violence, and it could also leave open the possibility of sending them all back, sending the troops back in one day. It'll be kind of easy to do. And the Taliban is making gains. And interesting, I wrote this up last week. A Taliban commander said, kind of a low-level guy, said that they haven't been, while they're gaining territory, they haven't been attacking provincial capitals because they don't want to violate the U.S. Taliban peace deal or the agreement that they signed for the withdrawal. And I thought that was interesting because there's annexes in this deal. Because the Taliban, if you read the PDF, like the public version of this deal, it says the Taliban agreed to not attack the U.S. and other foreign troops, which they haven't done, even after Biden broke the deal by pushing back the original May 1st withdrawal deadline. And they're now also saying that they're not attacking these capitals because there is an annex in the deal that the Taliban kind of agreed. They didn't agree to stop fighting the Afghan government. They agreed not to launch attacks on like major urban centers and things like that. So that's a sign. I mean, after September 11th, which is the stupidest date to pick for a withdrawal deadline from Afghanistan that Biden could have thought of. I mean, the optics of it are so horrible. The Taliban could just roll right. Who knows? I mean, if the Afghan military is struggling that much already, they might just be able to roll right in to Kabul. But I mean, that would be that would take a lot. But still, it's just a mess. And, what Biden has done has made it more of a mess. If he just pulled out by May 1st, there might have been a chance at peace. But if we keep supporting the Afghan government in this way, they're going to keep, they're just going to keep fighting the Taliban, and the Taliban's going to keep fighting them and advancing. So, it's just going to become it already is. It's been just a brutal proxy war since the deal was signed, that the U.S. occasionally involves itself in and bombs the Taliban. But, I mean, the Afghan military, the Afghan Air Force, are entirely a creation of the United States. And this is kind of the way things are going in the Middle East, too. Like, that's how I look at it, like with the Abraham Accords and stuff. They kind of want to create this, like, anti-Iran coalition that can fight the U.S. wars for them, so the U.S. doesn't have to put as many resources into it. Same thing with Saudi Arabia and in Yemen, and so yeah. And then this way, and then when it comes to China, the U.S. will want to maintain some kind of control in Afghanistan, and if they can keep this embassy and airport and have drones and planes that they can fly out of there, then they'll do that. Regardless of if it will just fuel more violence and more people in Afghanistan will get killed. And I mean, it's just not going to do anything for the stability of the country. Not that it would be stable for a long time until after the U.S. just left. But it's just a mess.
Yeah. So there's, I guess, like kind of two questions I have here. I'm not sure if you caught this, but the White House press secretary Jen Psaki said that the Trump deal gave the Biden administration no choice to withdraw from Afghanistan because if the U.S. stayed, then U.S. troops would come under attack. And so I thought that was a pretty clever trip she's making there, because the only reason U.S. troops in Afghanistan currently aren't under attack is because of the agreement. Once that was signed in 2020, well, really once the U.S. was like kind of getting into negotiations with the Taliban, the attacks against U.S. soldiers slowed down some, and then once that was signed, there hasn't been any. And so to say that if we don't follow through with that agreement, then our troops will come under attack, that's why we have to leave, seems to leave out a pretty misleading part, that the U.S. troops would have been under attack the whole time without the agreement. But I was wondering about your kind of take on that. But then a larger question is, what have you thought about this withdrawal from the Biden administration? Does it seem like the administration's really on board with getting out? It seemed kind of messy and chaotic to me, that they really don't know what's going on. That's why we have so many times where the reports are conflicting, whether the contractors will stay and how this is all going to work. It seemed to be really questionable up until about a week or two ago, if they were going to get the interpreters out, and what the process is going to look like for other Afghans who have supported the U.S. war effort in that country. Maybe you weren't an interpreter, but I'm sure there's plenty of other people who could be under risk of reprisal attack. And just how I don't know. I feel like it's been very chaotic from the Biden administration's part. I was just worrying about your take on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that they really don't know I think they still don't even know what it's going to look like after like a few days from now. It seems like a lot of it was, I mean, there was reports that said Biden like went against the generals and ordered the withdrawal. I don't know how true that is, but it probably is true to some extent. Because they were all probably telling him to stay or push it back, which he did end up pushing it back. So I don't want to really give him much credit, because I don't really want to give him any credit, because he broke the deal by pushing back the May 1st date. He waited around and didn't make a move. And but I think they're just looking at it and saying, like, we can't, like, it's either a surge or we pull out, or we do what they appear to be doing, which is kind of continue funding the Afghan military and hope that they can hold on and we could keep this little compound in Kabul. But I think that was really the thing. I don't think it's that they're really that excited about leaving Afghanistan. I think they just looked at it and said it's either a surge, a big surge, or we do this. So and then the Pentagon is just scrambling. It really seems like they're just scrambling for ways to keep bombing Afghanistan and keep a presence, some sort of presence in the country. Because there was all these reports about them trying to negotiate a deal with neighboring countries for a new base, like next to Afghanistan. But it doesn't seem like that has worked out. I don't think any of those countries in the region want a U.S. base. So, yeah, it just seems like a mess. It's a scramble. I think they just didn't have much of a choice. And, I mean, you look at Syria, it's kind of similar. It's a little different, but, I mean, the U.S. presence during the Trump administration, even under Obama, in Syria was pretty small, like a few hundred troops, 400 or 500. Apparently it could have, they weren't disclosing numbers, but I believe it got as low as 200 under Obama at the end of the Obama administration. So So yeah, so it's 650 troops. It's not nothing, and it's just kind of what's becoming the status quo in these conflicts, and that these decades old conflicts now. Um, in Iraq, there's still 2,500 U.S. troops there, and they're trying to start another war by bombing the Shia militias. But yeah, it's kind of it's. I don't think we're ever gonna see in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, like a major boots on the ground invasion or surge anytime soon. But that with drone warfare and all these proxies and stuff, the U.S. the empire doesn't need to really do that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking, along the lines that the U.S. does end up escalating in Afghanistan. My guess is Biden will just try to carry out enough airstrikes to prevent a collapse of the Kabul government and Afghan army under his watch. Or maybe, even getting to 2023 or so would be good enough, getting past the midterms or something like that. But I do really worry that if the Taliban really start to take a lot of territory and the Afghan government's really falling apart, the Afghan military is completely dissolving, then he could, get desperate because the Republicans will use that as ammunition and it'll look bad. It's really not Biden's fault that it's going down that way. But, because he's not out there every day yelling about how the Trump administration decided to make the Afghan army buy a bunch of American-made helicopters rather than just letting them buy more of the Soviet-made ones that actually they were able to repair. Now I have a catastrophe on my hands. What do you want me to do? The corruption and all this money we've given to the government has absolutely gone to waste. It's a terrible outcome, but all we could do is right now is leave, rather than this idea that kind of pretending that we built something successful and that we're somehow leaving a better place than we came is just putting him into a bad corner. But anyways, Dave, any final thoughts you have? If not, tell people where to follow you and to find your work and support you.
Yeah, I think I would just say, like you said, that there's going to be a lot of calls for the U.S. to go back in from Republicans and Democrats. So, yeah, that's always going to be a possibility, especially the way that they're trying to leave it. But we also don't know until it happens what exactly is going to happen. There's a small chance that they might just say, okay, let's just pull them all out. But I mean, that's a very small chance because then the government will fall, and but even that plan to just do limited airstrikes to prevent Kabul from falling, I mean, that's just it'll just be such a disaster. So none of their plans are sustainable. They should just get them all out and never look back. But of course, that's not going to happen. But yeah, so that's it. I read antiwar.com and follow me on Twitter at DeCamp Dave. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. Thanks, Dave, so much for coming back on. We'll have to do it again soon.
Thanks, Kyle.